So on Monday we're going to be drawing birds at the zoo and then using those drawings to make some lino prints the following week. And so working with lino really involves, or it requires, a kind of drawing where you simplify and create a design. Simplify your subject, your bird, in such a way that it can translate into this different medium. And if I show this as an example, a lino print of fish, this is quite a good demonstration of how a silhouetted shape, often with a certain pattern. This fish has some spots, there are a couple of lines for gills, and perhaps usefully, as the tail turns, there's a line cut into to define the fin and show how there's a bend in the creature. This one's a bit simpler, it's really just got some stripes. And those silhouettes have a negative shape of really fairly random leftover lines where the lino hasn't been completely cut out. Another example, some rather nice dogs. Again, silhouettes, but these lines that denote the collar or outline the ear or help the leg stand out from the body, they're very significant. And this piece, in part done by none other than Hope and two of her friends, done in 3 parts, these giraffes. So you can see really the value of the pattern of the animal. And the head, you can see, has been cleaned out, just leaving behind the eye and the mouth and the horns. And again, just a fairly random, chipped away background, taking the lino away so that only a little bit of ink creates some textured background. So thinking of patterns, silhouetted shapes, and maybe also thinking about background. So this is a piece of lino that's done by my daughter Iris. She got into birds for a school project. So this is rather a nice piece because it's got quite a few elements. Firstly, the larger bird with some lines within the silhouetted body to show the wings and the face and the eye and the tail feathers. But then there's this amazing perspective where the background's been treated in a way that firstly there's scope for this receding line of pylons or wires with birds sitting on them. There's another a bird in flight silhouetted against a lighter sky, and then eventually we get some lighter birds against a darker sky. So that really works. Even though you could say, for example, the sky isn't consistent, it goes from being light to dark, the lines suggesting clouds and colour in the sky, again a little bit random, but they're consistently horizontal, which I think helps distinguish them from the birds. Because what we're looking for in these zoo bird drawings is essentially a design, I'm going to suggest a couple of ways in which you might try working in order to achieve the simplification that comes with this sort of design. And the first way would be good old charcoal rub-away drawing, which begins, of course, with covering the page with some charcoal, then perhaps introducing some lines. So we will probably begin our zoo bird adventure with the flamingos, which are quite close to the entrance, and they're pretty good at staying still, sometimes on one leg. And you might begin, as I'm doing here, with some kind of line drawing. Having covered your page with the charcoal, you can then start to add and subtract in the way that you will eventually do with your liner. But I just interrupt, have you seen my new studio, by the way? Look at that. Anyway, so having laid out some kind of line drawing here, I can either carry on adding some dark. So the flamingos often have quite dark beaks. There may be some markings. And then perhaps the simplest thing really is to subtract around the shape that I've drawn. Maybe I want to suggest something of their setting, because as well as creating some kind of design from the bird, I might also want to develop the background in some way. And I think very often with lino, because it's essentially adding and subtracting, adding dark ink, usually dark ink onto a light background, then I've got to decide on whether things are dark or light. With the flamingo, it's clear to me that the beak is dark, but will I make the whole bird dark? I could do that, but then I want to also introduce some kind of texture. So for example, how do I make more of the head and the eye? Will I subtract a little bit around here? Will I introduce some markings to suggest the feathers, the wing, and so on? And then what will I do with the background? At the moment it's grey, but I think it would be good to introduce some textures suggesting the ground. So with the liner, I'm going to be able to work in, if you like, black and white, but I can also create different sorts of greys using the textures and patterns of my subject. So that's going to be something to explore with the charcoal rub away technique. Another approach that I'm going to suggest we try is working on some black paper with white chalk. So I'll just isolate an area there, and if I were, as I'm sure you will, consider drawing a penguin, then I could start with my white outlines, but then apply areas of chalk so that I have something of the white patterning of the bird, but also because of the black paper I'll be assured of a certain amount of black area in my design. So finding the white belly isn't too difficult, and possibly some lighter areas in the head. But then what else? Well, I could just introduce something of a kind of texture at the base, and there could be quite specific things. I mean, because it's black paper, I can actually work with the eraser. If I've changed my mind about that line, and then continue to introduce this textured pattern as something of a floor, aground and bring those marks right up to the edge of the black shape of the bird, then maybe I should just try some, well, I think probably I should consider, I don't know, icebergs or something. So maybe some of these shapes need to be in the background. What's an iceberg look like? Some things like this, they could be mistaken for clouds, so I'll need to do my research. And they could be white. Could work. Definitely look like clouds now. So maybe I've got to continue my textured effect a bit further. So it's this combination of light and dark shapes and distinguishing or defining particular parts of the design with their own texture or pattern. So there's a couple of approaches which we can use in the zoo in order to develop our lino print designs.